Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Near at Home Facilitators. We have a very robust community of practice, and we love to dive deep into topics related to near at home. So we're delighted to invite you to listen in on our conversation today. We also want to invite you to submit any questions that you might want us to explore. The questions could be about implementing near at home. It could be about anything related to near at home. Maybe after you listen to our conversation today, you'll get a sense of where we like to go deep. But if you have a question or concept you want us to explore, just send an email to us at nearathome@gmail.com. And near at home is written out. We can't do the little squiggly thing in there. So my name is Quinn Zora, and I am the lead near at home facilitator. And these are the other facilitators.
So I'm Janine Jeffries-Wolf from Alaska.
I'm Carol Young from the northern panhandle of Idaho.
I'm Leah Nieswag from Southern Idaho.
I'm Rhonda Crooker from Washington State.
I'm Michelle Harvey in Oregon.
Awesome. So I did not tell everybody what we're going to talk about today, but this is a question, or we've been questioned about this from home visitors as we've come to your programs and helped you learn the near at home. And some home visitors have asked us, what is this parallel process you keep talking about? We talk a lot about parallel process in near at home. And some of us are really comfortable with that term and we use it a lot. We know what it means, and that's a new term for other people. So I thought today we could talk about, from the near at home perspective, what do we mean by parallel process?
I can start.
Okay.
So my team always teases me because, Michelle, and parallel process, it's like my favorite word. But I'm thinking about the theory of change for near at home and how we work, starting with looking at the foundations of safety and this idea of being with for home visitors, right? And so looking at how do we as facilitators enter into space and enter in relationship with programs first, and what has that history looked like for that program, and what do those relationships look like, and then when we're working with programs, sort of thinking about holding in mind the parallel process of how we are is the way that we're hoping home visitors can be with parents, with the idea that parents will be like that with their children. So really thinking about this space of holding. So I think a lot of folks think when we think of parallel process, we're thinking, oh, top down, right? Like, oh, it starts big and it works its way down. And I think it's also not only looking at like from administration down to the baby and all the relationships that bridge those gaps, but also looking at the baby on up. So how the baby is with the parent, that's going to impact how the parent is with the home visitor and what the home visitor's experience is. And those experiences are going to be brought into supervision, and then the supervisor is going to be feeling that. And so it really is a parallel going both directions, and sort of all the things, trauma, feelings, being with, resilience, all of it sort of tag teaming onto each other's stories and noticing how are we holding that whole picture for everybody together.
Well, Michelle, I don't think I've ever thought about it, or maybe I just can't remember thinking about it from the baby's perspective going that direction. Mm-hmm. That is really fascinating. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like to thinking of as it. Actually, I can't get my words, but just that one impact or one relationship impacts the other, or relationship impacting relationship. but also relationships that are present and relationships that are not present. The ghost in the nursery, or the supervisor ghost, the supervisor consultation, but also keeping that in mind too, going off of Michelle, of the relationships present and not present.
I really love the simplified version, really, that you just said, Leah, of that one relationship impacts another relationship without putting positive, negative, kind of those modifiers on it, is that all relationships impact other relationships. It kind of leads me back to the how we are is more important than what we do thing, because that's the relationship piece. And so in, near at home facilitated learning, we're really focused on not as much the content of what we're doing, although there certainly are content pieces, but the how we as facilitators share that information with programs. So how we are with everyone that we're in contact with, and then keeping in mind how the home visitors are with the families, but we're also thinking about how the families are, how the parents receive this information or don't want to receive it. I mean, all of the relationship impacts and how to meet people where they are, and then recognizing what those impacts are and what do we do with those impacts.
I like that you said that piece about we're not so worried about the content, because I think about when we ask home visitors, the goal isn't to do the ACE questionnaire or like to find out what's on the ACE questionnaire. It's not about figuring out that content, but more about the process of it, if that makes sense. And I think sometimes programs, and we all can get caught up in the content because
we're content driven.
Right. And it's evocative, right? So when we're in the presence of a baby, we're, our biology is wired to be attuned or alert or,
I agree. So too, just thinking about like that connectedness, like we are so connected and we can't pull that apart. And I think sometimes we try to pull that apart and we try to operate as individuals, or we feel like, oh, I'm this individual that's operating in my silo. And I remember for me, even sometimes feeling like, okay, like I'm on a team, but I'm the only person that's working with this family, right? Like my supervisor's not coming with me on a home visit. Like my team is not with me on a home visit. And so thinking about how are we with each other, right? So that we can carry one another into home visits. And I think too, like then once I became a supervisor and reading, because with the program that I've worked in, we do these initial interviews for families and they share a lot about their stories. And then as a supervisor, getting this to read these stories that these home visitors then typed up. And some of them were so just heavy and there was so much there. And so as a supervisor, having to sometimes just set it down so that I could just go for a walk around my living room and just like knowing what that home visitor had to hold. And thinking when I was a home visitor, that never even crossed my mind. Right? Like I didn't even think about, oh, my supervisor is reading my work and they're also thinking of me, right? And they're thinking of what that situation was like and what that home visit was like, and thinking about that parent and thinking about that baby. And so I feel like that's also part of how some of that connection, I think, can feel invisible if we don't just really bring it out into the open and name it.
And that it carries through. When I think of near at home, like sometimes for me, it helps to take it from the broad concepts and think of a time. And one time that I remember is part of the process of Near at Home is to ensure choice, to ensure safety, to ensure respect within that. And that's a piece that gets paralleled through all the different relationships. We want parents to do that for their kids. We want families, and in fact, it's written into Near at Home for home visitors to give families opportunity for that choice and to be safe. We want the administrators to do it to the staff, right? But then I remember a time that I, as a Near at Home facilitator, was not getting a response from a agency to do the Near at Home. And I was feeling that like, I've got to get all my groups in Alaska ready and getting on. And I started to nag. Well, could we do it now? Could we do it then? Well, how about this? And sending too many pieces and not giving respect to the fact that this wasn't the right time for that agency until I realized it. And then the parallel could reverse so that I could say to that agency, oh my gosh, I wasn't hearing. This wasn't the right time. Trust yourself, which meant that administrator could say to the home visitors, yeah, trust yourself. You'll know when the right time for this is, which helps home visitors do it to parents, which helps parents do it to kids. And even that piece, that there's that happens on so many different layers or levels.
The interconnectivity that we have with each other, even when we can't see it. So your example is so beautiful because, you know, you're talking about the home visitor's perspective. And so as a home visitor, there are probably things that you don't think about that your supervisor or the administrators do. So you have that perspective. And supervisors who've not done home visiting before sometimes struggle with understanding what the home visitors are doing. And yet there's still an interconnection, relationships that are impacting each other even when we don't know they are. So that, I mean, parallel process happens whether or not we even know what the word means.
I feel like I'm laughing too, like thinking about like some of my worst home visits and how horrible they were. And like Janine, like you pushing programs, and sometimes I felt like I was like pushing families, like, I'm gonna prove you wrong, right? But then like looking back at that and what that experience, like what was I experiencing as a home visitor, right? Like what was that like for me? Because I think there were parts where in my role, I felt like people were trying to prove me wrong. You know, like I didn't have that same listening necessarily. So that's funny to think about.
Or when home visitors have to do things.
Yeah.
Like with Near at Home, it's a choice, right? So everything's a choice. And how when, you know, even as a facilitator, when Quinn would be like, it's okay. You don't, you know, it's like, oh, okay. It feels okay. And then how then we can grant that more to programs. Okay, no problem. That doesn't work for you, you know, like, and just thinking of that self-efficacy, that I can choose what's best for me, or that I even know what's best for me, and how trauma can impact that. And
One of the things that I really like thinking about the idea of empowerment, because I don't like the word empowerment, but one of the things that I've been learning around that is it's not so much empowering the other person, but especially when we're coming from a place of privilege, it's my role to sort of like step out of the way, right? And so when I'm in a relationship, like as a supervisor, how do I step out of the way to have a home visitor come up with their own answers? When I'm working directly with a parent, how do I sort of like remove myself, not literally, but, you know, metaphorically, I guess, how do I step out of the way and have the parent come up with their own solutions and their own, you know, just
ideas,
answers, and ideas, and thinking about like with parenting, we're not necessarily looking at how does the parent step out of the way, but looking at like how do they help a baby grow. And so thinking about all these different parallels for what that looks like. So for me, it's also like now as a manager, like not micromanaging, right? And all the different ways that gets trickle down.
The art of the work,
Mm.
that piece of it. So parenting, oh gosh, I mean, if there was indeed one parenting manual that worked for all children and families,
Mhm.
like a gazillionaire right now,
Mhm.
it's not that simple. There's an art and that like that empowerment stepping out of the way piece, but
Mhm.
how do I facilitate the art of creating safety and choice and collaboration within when these and when that happens, what are the parallels? What are the, like, you throw the rock in the still pond and you see the ripples continue. That's kind of that's sort of what a parallel process might look like.
Mhm. Well, and I think this idea too that believing that parents do have the answers, even when they maybe don't think they do. It's kind of like when you just let a child play versus when you're like, okay, now I'm going to set up this little table over here and then we're going to do this activity. Like that self-discovery, which you have in home visiting too as a home visitor. Like that development that you go through when you're new or you've done it for a while or a long time. Parallel process.
You know, I was
Go ahead, Rhonda.
just, I've been sitting here thinking, how do I find words to say what I want to say? But I was reflecting on being a new home visitor and then the growth that has taken place through the years. And home visiting for me got a lot easier when I let go of kind of the shoulds and the have tos, and I started understanding more about the magic of just showing up and being with and joining someone and following their lead and for years and years I think nobody modeled that for me necessarily. And so discovering that was just little bits and pieces. And so once I kind of had a few of those pieces in my home visitor tool belt, things started to feel so much easier for me, but also things started to happen with families that were pretty amazing too. So yeah, I think it took me as a home visitor a lot longer to develop some of the skills that had parallel process really been in place. I mean, I think that's also the beauty of the parallel process is it supports home visitors so well in the work that they do, and it's just critical for a home visitor's growth.
Wow.
I love that the talk of that it's all about relationships at the bottom and everything that we do. And even now, as we're talking about parallel process, we're talking about the connection between all things, that what happens in this relationship is connected completely to this relationship. Yeah, but I hadn't thought of it with that word before, but yeah, I like how it connects again.
Well, thank you all for your deep thinking and sharing your thoughts. And those of you who are listening in on our conversation, remember we'd love to have more conversations with you. So send us an email and we will try to address your questions or your thoughts. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.